Good afternoon. Tzaharaim Tovim. This week we're talking about Parshat Ekev. I've entitled this Aspirations versus Reality. So as you know, I love linguistics, and we begin this parsha with Vahaya Ekev. Tishma'un et mishpatim ha'elev u'shmartem v'atzitim otam u'shmar Hashem Elokecha lecha et ha'brit ve'et ha'chesed asher nishbalotecha. It is basically an if-then statement. Ekev Yaakov, on the heels of, if you think of that expression in English, meaning that A is connected to B. And here we have, and if you abide, if you do X, then on the heels of that, Y will happen, Ekev. If you listen to the ordinances, to the commandments, and you keep them and you perform them that God wants you to do, then God will keep for you the covenant and the kindness that God swore to your forefathers. Now, in the real lane, when we're confronted by these if-then statements, conditional statements, we often tune out the if and only hear the then. If you do everything that you're supposed to, then you'll get your special trip. Why aren't I getting my special trip? If you don't do X, then Y will happen. Well, why is Y going to happen? That's a terrible thing. And we have to remember the linkage, the on the heels of relationship between our actions, which here is the if clause, and what God will do. And this will continue through Devarim, through this Mishnah Torah, as it is intended for future generations. Those did not witness the going out of Egypt and things like that, except we just know the narrative. We may have nostalgic connections to it. We may feel more connected. We may take to heart the idea that we should see ourselves as if we were there, which is what we say on Pesach. But in the meantime, the if clause is what you will do. The then clause is what God will do. God will love you. God will bless you. And will bless the fruit of your womb, the fruit of your soil, your grain, your wine, and you will be blessed above all peoples. So the question here is, the formula is given, but does this work? Is there something amiss in the suggested equation? And what are the problems with this statement? We then read, V'haser Hashem mimcha kol chale v'kol midvei Mitzrayim haraim. God will remove from you all illness and all of the evil things from Egypt which you knew. God will not set upon you. God will rather lay those things on your enemies. And you will consume v'chalte kol ha'amim, all the people that God puts before you. And then you will say to yourself, just as they said before, Ki tomar bilavacha rabbim hagoyim ha'ele mimeni echa uchal lahorisham. Singular use. Remember, we always note when the singular and when the plural is used. These nations are more numerous than this collective, than I. How will I be able to drive them out? But you shall not fear. You should surely remember all the things that God did to Pharaoh and all of Egypt. Now, here we have this aspirational expression of what one may hope is reality. In thinking about this, I wonder if we are eclipsing the process itself of getting to the point where this result occurs, which looks so lovely, but ignoring all the steps in the process therein. And by the way, there are parts of this that are difficult. The idea that we would turn around, or that God would turn around and do horrible things to other people, obviously is something that we have to address and contend with within other teachings of Yahadut. One of the things that comes up in my learning of Rambam, in looking at, I'm now doing the laws of the Mizbeach, of the Korbanot, of the sacrifices, is that there's this ideational idea that the Kohen has to be perfect, and there's 150 different mumim and disqualifying factors that are listed, that the Korban the sacrifice has to be perfect, same thing. And as I asked my dear Rav Eliezer Hirsch this past Shabbat, so was there really a Kohen or a Korban that met all these criteria for perfection? Just as we have our aspirational ideas, so too may God. And maybe the aspiration is set there as a goal point to get us to do the best we can and to get everybody to do the best they can, so that certain things will never really happen. But if we achieve the goal, then the aspirational part of where we are may happen. And this may seem like apologetics, but if you think about it carefully, it really isn't. Because there are these other aspirational ideas that all people will come to recognize that God is God and we will all act appropriately toward each other. And then there won't have to be this national contention that we all know very well. Let's think for a minute about our own real situation. As we've said, we're all too familiar with the aspirational. If you do X, then Y will happen. Call it motivational. Think of it as cause and effect. Good actions bring good results, not so good actions. Well, you know. This if-then clause and reaction notion is consistent with Ekev, tying our actions and initiatives to the heels of the results. We can either hold ourselves back or propel ourselves forward, depending on the choices we make and the actions we take. So, isn't that simple and obvious? Well, not really. Looking at our lives today, in the United States of America, more and more of our 20 and 30-something population are feeling hopeless, helpless, and worthless. Depression is rising precipitously amongst the generation that has been given so much and is greatly resourced. As the world modernizes, more individuals have adopted a sedentary lifestyle, resulting in less time spent outdoors, less physical activity, poor diets, more isolation, and becoming a slave to the screen, so to speak. We are reminded by our medical professionals that these are all risk factors for depression as well as for poor heart health, type 2 diabetes, obesity, and other health conditions. All of this is on the rise according to our National Health Organization watchdog statistics projects. In spite of the conveniences, the wealth, and the level of achievement for those of privilege. Clearly, these factors are even more problematic for the less resourced and the more vulnerable amongst us. But for the moment, let's consider why this is the case for those who have the opportunity to make the right choices, to exercise that if clause to its maximal effectiveness. As Nate Rutherford reports for the BBC, a survey in 2016 asked Americans whether they would rather achieve great things or be happy. And 81% said they would rather be happy, while only 13% opted for achieving great things. 6% were understandably daunted by the choice and weren't sure. Despite the ubiquity of happiness as a goal, it is hard to know how to define it or how to achieve it. Yet, more and more aspects of life are judged in terms of their contribution to the phantom of happiness, to that perfect aspiration, if you will. Does your relationship, does your job, does your home, your body, your diet make you happy? If not, aren't you doing something wrong? In our modern world of today, happiness is the closest thing we have to summum bonum, the highest good from which all other goods flow. In this logic, unhappiness becomes the summum malum, the greatest evil to be avoided. There is some evidence that this obsessive pursuit of happiness is associated with a greater risk of depression and all that comes with it. The National Institute of Health associates the continuing rise in depression as a function of modernity. Now that one has all that they want that could conceivably make them happy, so goes the reasoning, what is there to do? As an example of how this dynamic comes to be, let us look at Nechama Leibowitz's explanation of the mana test, explained in this parsha, and her explanation of various mefarshim for our benefit. We read, V'zacharta kol haderech asher holichecha Hashem Elokecha ze 40 shana b'midbar leman hanecha v'nastacha ladat et asher b'levavecha hatishmor mitzvotav im lo. And you will remember the long trek which the Lord your God hath taken you on these past 40 years, that God might afflict you to put you to the test to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep God's commandments or not. and God afflicted you and suffered you hunger and fed you with manna, which you did not know before then. And your fathers did not know. So now you have something that the ones before did not have, who fed you in the wilderness and put you to the tests to do good for you at the end. Both in our Sidra above and in Shemot, chapter 16, the manna is described as a trial or a test, a nisayon for Israel, an experience, nisayon, nasa, to try, also test. Our commentators have remarked on the unusual nature of this trial. Usually, we think of a test or a trial as something to be borne, an unpleasant experience or a burdensome duty. But this was food for free. No effort on your part. It could taste like anything you wanted. There was plenty of it. You didn't have to store it. You didn't have to prepare it. You didn't have to wash the dishes afterwards. It was supposed to be the perfect meal. What happened? The Abravanel asks, what test was implied in the provision of their daily manna with a double portion on Shabbat? Eve, certainly, this was a great kindness, not a test. It would make them exceedingly happy, no? Rashi explains. In the first context where it appears in Shemot, where the Almighty announces the sending of the manna, it is said, that I may put them to the test, whether they will walk in my law or not, to see if they will heed the precepts that are connected, that they should not leave over and not go out gathering on Shabbat. So what was the test? The test was, do you have faith after being told that you will get a double portion on Shabbat, or of Shabbat, and then will you go to collect on Shabbat, which is against the malachot that one does not do on Shabbat. The test then was not in the gift of the manna itself, but in the instructions. Not in the then, but in the if. Ekev. The way the Israelites honored these instructions would serve as a pointer to their loyalty to the divine commands to see whether they will walk in the law of God or not. But by the same token, surely every precept in the Torah can be termed a test or a trial. We may detect, however, in the wording of the text that the trial had nothing to do with the instructions governing the manna, but with the actual enjoyment of the heavenly food. The life of luxury and ease that they would enjoy in virtue of the manna would constitute the greatest trial of all. That God may put you to the test. Sforno teaches, if you will do God's will, then God will grant you sustenance without any suffering or effort on your part. So this should bring great happiness, no? No work on Shabbat, just enjoy. But wait a minute. Would the Bnei Yisrael remember that the source of their happiness and comfort came from God and have faith and obey that source, namely God? In other words, would the Israelites continue to fear God and keep God's commandments, fear in the sense of awe, by the way, in their times of prosperity, or would they forget? The child has done what they've done. The parent has given them the trip. They're enjoying the then clause. They forgot the if clause. They begin to misbehave. We may object to this explanation on the grounds that the diet of manna in the wilderness is represented as a burden, an affliction, and not as an enjoyment. In other words, maybe the plan is too bland. Remember, they missed their watermelon and meat and peppers and all of that, which supposedly, if the manna could taste like anything they wanted, they may have the taste of. But I guess maybe it's like tofu. We add spices, we make it all kinds of things, but people still want the real thing, not the substitute. Nachmanides suggests a more plausible explanation. He says, the situation in which the Israelites were placed regarding the manna represented a great trial for them, since they entered the desert without food of any sort and without a clear way out. They were totally dependent on the daily portion of manna, which rained down and melted in the heat of the sun. In other words, they had to eat it. They couldn't leave any over. They couldn't put it in the refrigerator and have leftovers for breakfast. They hungered for it greatly, but bore all the suffering in obedience to God, who might have led them through an inhabited area as opposed to the desert, where they had to be totally dependent on God to learn how to have that relationship with God. God chose, however, to confront them with this trial in order to test their loyalty to God. In other words, Nachmanides maintains that the manna constituted a trial for the Israelites owing to its unusual nature. Neither they nor their fathers had known it. It was an unpopular, strange food which was not given to them in abundance and could not be stored. Each day was viewed by apprehension by the hungry Israelites who waited expectantly for the manna and were assailed by the doubt that it would not suffice. The author of HaKetev HaKabbalah clarifies the meaning of the word trial as used at this point in the Torah. God, who is all-knowing, requires no proof. God's trial is rather to prove to the person on whom the trial is placed the limits of his own capabilities. That I might put thee to the test means that God will bring man into such a situation that will be able to prove to man himself the extent of his faith and trust in God. The Biur suggests the following approach to our text. By being placed in a position of absolute reliance on the Almighty for their daily sustenance, they would become habituated to trust in God, and their faith in God would hopefully become part and parcel of their nature, a natural inclination, if you will. Now, lest you think there's no potential drawback or danger here, can this trust be lost? Or does self-doubt begin to invade the equation of life? When one doubts, one loses perspective, and they forget what even they have learned. My mom, who had a very difficult life, Allah Shalom, and bore the scars of various trauma in her journey in this world, always used to say, I don't understand depression. We didn't have the choice to be depressed. We just had to keep going to survive. There is something there. I would suggest that the depression was clearly present, and I witnessed that. But her point was that she could not allow her to feel that she had the luxury to deal with it, and instead wrapped herself up in the daily demands of life. As a cost, I think that happiness often eluded her, and it made that impact on those around her that was inescapable and in some cases profound. Happiness is about what we do in very real ways. I often think of my many chronological peers who have retired or who are in the process of making plans to do so. It is not surprising that many people who may be happy that work is no longer a necessary component of their daily life are not doing so well. Health declines, depression increases, some of those illnesses that I mentioned in the beginning begin to present themselves. There is increased evidence of not doing well amongst this population. Why are we here, they ask at this point? To chase that elusive and aspirational happiness that is devoid of responsibility? Or is it something else? Later on, in Parak 10, Yud, we read, Va'ata Yisrael ma Hashem Elokecha she'al mi'amecha, ki'im yir'at Hashem Elokecha la'lechet b'chol derachav v'lahava ato la'vet et Hashem Elokecha b'chol b'chol nafshcha. And now, Israel, what is God asking from you? Except to have awe for God, to walk in God's ways, and to love and to serve the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul. Iterations of the Shema, which of course appears in various ways in our text. To observe the mitzvot of God, God's laws, that I, Moshe, am telling you that God has commanded you. You shall listen to the Lord your God in the heavens, And if you do all this, you should circumcise your hearts to believe God. And God, who is this Ha'el, HaKadol, HaGibor, VaHanorah, words that we all know from our prayers, this great God, this strong God, this awesome God, will protect you. And you do not do things that God does not want you to do. You don't take a bribe. You don't ignore people. You do justly with the yatum, with the orphan, and with the almanah, with the widow. You give bread and clothing to the ger. You shall love the ger, the stranger, because you were strangers in Egypt, and God will be there for you. Now, notice, this is not talking about this elusive chasing of happiness with nothing to claim on your time. Rather, there are clearly things to do here. Situations to improve, initiatives to take, responsibilities to maintain. Then in the next chapter, we see our familiar text that we recite daily as part of the Shema, with its stated and implied to-do list. You will listen and you will do the mitzvot that I, God, have commanded to you. You will love God. You will serve God with all your heart, with all your soul. And God will then give us dew on our land in its time, and we will be able to collect our vegetables and our grains, and will give us grass, will give us food, and we will we will eat and be satisfied. And we should observe all of this, and we should not go after other gods. If we do that, God will be angry at us and will close up the heavens. There will not be dew. There will not be everything that God sends. And you should observe these words. They should be on your heart and on your soul. And we repeat from the first paragraph of the Shema. And they should be signs between your eyes and on your arms. You will teach them to your children. You will speak of them when you walk in your house, when you return, when you go out. Again, repeating from the first paragraph of the Shema. You will write them on the mezuzot on your gates. Laman, then, if then, Yirbu Yemechem, your days will be lengthened, the days of your children on the land that God has sworn to give you. And God will do this after you do your part. Ekev, on the heels of, there's a relationship. And an inextricable connectivity between our initiatives and the results they bring. This is about reality and real work, not aspirational dreams in the sky. Aspirations can lead us to this, but aspirations alone are not enough. Just as we may have our aspirations regarding the best of life, we must remember that perhaps God has aspirations regarding what is to be the best of us. Back to my friends who are retiring, I always ask people, I understand what you're retiring from. What are you retiring to? Are you busy? Are you doing good things? Are you going out and volunteering in the community? Are you working to make our world better? Are you doing the work that will bring you happiness? Because just sitting around doing nothing doesn't generally bode well. It's not to free ourselves from doing. It's to free ourselves to do. Many misunderstand elusive happiness as snapping one's fingers and having everything perfect according to their desires. I open the refrigerator and everything I want is there. Nobody's shocked, it's magic. It's mana, it's magic. But one can only sustain fantasy and live by it for so long. Let us all come to an understanding of how we achieve an accomplishment of desired results through doing our part. This is what will propel us forward and not hold us back. This is what will bring us real Flawed, imperfect, but real happiness. Not aspirational, in the sky, I have nothing to do. Whatever you want to call it. This, I believe, is an important message of Parshat Ekev. Shabbat Shalom to all, and just a few business points. I don't believe that these are appearing any longer on Melrose Benet's Facebook, so please just go to my own Facebook. If you don't already have it, just ask around or PM me. You can do that just by going on Facebook and searching for my name, and I will add you to my Facebook so that you can access this. Number 2, next week I will be in Boston for work. I don't know what time I will be recording this. It will be at some random time because at this time next Thursday I'll be on a train coming back to Philadelphia. And then the following week, I will be talking about 2 parshiot because the week after that, my family is going on a vacation for real. So I am taking a for real 12-day vacation without doing anything of this nature. I'm going to get in the water and hang out with my family and go visit fun places and go to a concert. We're doing plenty recreationally. Remember, happiness can be real. It doesn't have to just be aspirational. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.